Chapter 42. Relieved and satisfied, she pulled on her clothes so they could get on their way. They each gobbled down some of the bread and nuts from their food stores, which were running low, and then Aiden went to fill their water skins in the stream, leaving Sierra in the tree so he could use his fey pace to get to the river and back as quickly as possible. When he returned, he helped Sierra get her pack on her shoulders before asking if she was ready. She nodded in response, and Aiden took her hand, and they were off at the same pace as the day before, Sierra struggling to keep up. If she ever got to go back to her old life, she was seriously going to hit the gym. It was brighter than the day before, and Sierra tried to take in what she could as they passed through the forest. There were all types of birds and flowers that she wished she had more time to watch and study. Hopefully, someday she would be able to, maybe at some distant point in the future when she was no longer in danger. She quickly brushed off the thought. They were going to solve this issue soon. She was sure of it. Unlike the day before, the journey went quickly, and all too soon, Sierra found herself staring at a small wooden home in the middle of a clearing in the enchanted forest. Aiden had them stop in the tree line, turning to her before they proceeded.
I have to warn you, the seer, Fia, is strange, but there is no reason to hide anything from her. She knows all anyway.
Sierra's eyes widened.
She can see the future, the past, and sometimes I think she can see other beings that we don't.
He took a deep breath.
She might say some things that terrify you, but I promise she is just trying to convey what she knows in the best way possible.
I understand. Sierra swallowed as Aiden took her hand for the second time that day and led them at a leisurely pace to the door of the building. Before they could knock, the door opened, revealing a beautiful woman in a floor-length purple gown. Her golden hair fell in 2 long braids down her back, and while she was clearly fey, Sierra could sense something else about her, but she couldn't put a name to what it was. This was likely the strangeness that Aiden had mentioned. "Aiden, Sierra," she said, greeting each of them with a bow of her chin before moving aside to let them into her home. "I've been waiting for you," she said in perfect English, which was almost spooky after weeks of hearing the she-accented English spoken by everyone around her. Aiden pulled Sierra into the house, which looked on the inside just as she suspected it would from the outside. The living room and kitchen were small and sparsely furnished. There was a stone fireplace, however, with flames crackling even though it wasn't the least bit cold. The kitchen held a wooden table with just 2 chairs and similar appliances to what Sierra saw in Chokran. The wall above the counter was filled with shelves lined with colorful bottles of all shapes and sizes and containing all manner of things. Some looked like food, and others Sierra hoped weren't food because they certainly didn't look edible. "Make yourselves comfortable," Fia motioned to the purple couch in the living room, which didn't look strong enough to hold both her and Aiden, but when they sat down, it didn't so much as creak. Fia picked up a wooden chair from the kitchen and placing it before them, she sat. "You have questions?" Sierra was glad that Aiden had warned her, as she was much less creeped out than she would have been had she just gone in blind. The one thing they hadn't talked about, however, was whether Sierra would be talking or Aiden would be. As it turns out, there was no need to discuss as Fia took Aiden's hands and placed them on the sides of her head. Sierra had never been a jealous woman, but something about the motion made her a bit uncomfortable. Maybe Fia could hear her thoughts, because without even a glance in Sierra's direction, she said, "I'm just showing him what I saw before he went to find out." Sierra nodded as Aiden's eyes drifted closed. She assumed he was committing to memory what he saw, or perhaps looking for details he had missed previously. "Would I be able to see too?" she asked. "I'm afraid not. I can only show people the future which pertains to them, meaning I could show you what I saw for your future, but I can't show you what I'm showing Aiden now." Sierra understood, and for a moment she wondered if she did, in fact, want to see her future. There was something inherently scary about being presented with the concept of being able to see what would come next in life. What if it was something she didn't like? Would she be able to change it? Aiden's eyes snapped open, glancing to the side to focus on Sierra before looking back at Fia.
Sierra,
He gasped.
I can't believe I never asked this before, but what is your master's thesis on?
Sierra cocked her head at the odd question, but answered anyway. I'm evaluating some of the variables in life which, when changed, can extend the human lifespan.
And have you made any discoveries yet?
He asked, his eyes drifting closed again. Yes and no. I just started the lab work, so the details on my experiments won't come back for a while. Plus, they are on mice, so some of it will be conjecture anyway. But based on some of the similar studies which I am reviewing, I believe there are several variables that can extend the human lifespan when observed early enough in life. Aiden's mouth was agape. He couldn't believe he had never discussed this with her before.
What are they?
Well, diet, for one. Vegetarians or pescatarians live much longer and are much less prone to diseases than those who consume meat. And if you look at the blue areas on Earth, the regions where humans live the longest, they are all the areas where the diet is majority pescatarian. And the only meat they occasionally eat other than fish is chicken or eggs, meaning no red meat at all. Sierra couldn't hide the emotion in her voice. This really was her passion project, and she rarely got to speak about it in length. Another factor I am looking into is exercise, as well as living in a familial unit or with another being for the entirety of life. So far, similar studies have concluded that those who stay active and don't live alone live longer than those who do. This is most clearly seen in Italy, on Sardinia, and in Icaria, Greece, two of the blue spots I spoke of. In those areas, it is common for young adults to live with their family until marriage, and from there, live with their partner together, often with the parents in the home or with siblings, so they almost never live alone and almost always live in homes of at least 4 adults. Of course, there are other aspects and variables too, and I am evaluating them in the same way, but I believe these are the 3 aspects I'll be focusing on. There is also a genetic aspect, which I can't always account for, but I'm trying to focus my thesis on variables that someone could control if they wanted to live a longer life. Aiden's eyes moved between Fia and Sierra. What did you see? Sierra asked. Maybe I'll recognize something you didn't.
Well, I saw you just as I did before, but this time instead of focusing on the background to try and figure out your location, I looked at what you were doing. Fia's visions are a bit like a slideshow.
He explained.
I saw you in a lab, and writing, and in a classroom. But now that I know you, I figure that these actions must have some significance because you aren't in your home or in the library, which are both big parts of your life.
Sierra's mind began to whir, like different pieces of a puzzle falling into place all at once. She thought over the topic of her thesis and the struggles of the Fae over the last few centuries and how they could possibly connect. Aiden, she breathed. You told me that Fae were traditionally vegetarian. Is that still the case? It was Fia who answered. The Fae used to be solely vegetarian, but with the technological advancements of the human world and the traders across the border with some regularity, many have started eating meat and animal products. Not as regularly as humans, but from time to time. Sierra turned that thought over in her mind. In the human world, there had been a trend of getting married later in life, which has led to many humans who, in previous generations, wouldn't live alone long before marriage, now spending many years by themselves. Has something like that changed here in She? Aiden nodded.
Yes, marriages used to be arranged by parents to preserve bloodlines, but the practice was, for the most part, discontinued over 100 years ago, mostly because it was thought to be cruel to arrange marriages and often led to a lot of infidelity which further thinned the bloodlines, though some Fae in positions of power still arrange suitable marriages for their children.
Sierra tilted her chin down. And have the Fae become less physically active? Fia shrugged. That I can't say for sure, but I will say that just as humans have had their technological advancements that lower hard labor, so too have the Fae. Then there's a possibility that similar factors to those affecting the human lifespan could also be affecting the Fae magic. I can't say for sure. I would need to perform some studies, and they would likely take Sierra swallowed uncomfortably. Hundreds of years to complete because your lifespan is already so much longer than a human's. I would also need to do some research, talking to Fae scientists here, as well as looking at any previous studies which may have been performed. Aidan ran a hand across his forehead.
There are some Fae scientists, most of whom live in Salak. I could take you there and see what the records have on hand.
His voice was somber, probably at the realization that Sierra's mortality could be a major preventing factor in their research, and the fact that this wasn't quite the quick fix they had been hoping to find. Sierra took a deep breath and looked at Fia. Can I see my future, please? Fia nodded. Be prepared to see things you may not like. Sierra's eyebrows shot up nearly to her hairline. Have you already seen? Fia shook her head. Once I touch you for the first time, I'll be able to look into your future on a regular basis, but since I haven't ever met you until today, I've only been able to see your future as it connects to Aidan. Sierra gulped. I can look first without showing you, if you would like, Fia offered. Sierra shook her head. No, I'll be fine, but I want to ask, is what you see set in stone? It was Fia's turn to shake her head. Far from it. The future I show you now is your current future. If you change paths, it will change. But know that intentions aren't taken into account, just actions. For example, if you see your death and then think about eating a healthy diet, the future I see won't change until you actually begin to do so, and there is a change within your body. This makes my gift excellent for long-term predictions, but terrible for telling the immediate future or helping someone make critical decisions. Sierra drew her eyes to Aidan. Have you already seen your death? Aidan nodded.
I have.
Sierra waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. He either wasn't scared of his impending death or believed he could change it. This thought made Sierra's thoughts spiral to the fact that he may have already seen her death, and panic snaked through her insides. Realizing she needed to rip off the Band-Aid and get it over with before she freaked out anymore, Sierra turned to Fia. All right, I'm ready. Fia dipped her chin, before placing Sierra's hands on either side of her head. Here we go, she whispered. The room around Sierra faded into white, and appearing before her, she saw a series of 3D images. The first was of her and Aidan, and she was dressed in a gown like she had worn while imprisoned, but this time it was red, and Aidan was dressed in very fancy attire, almost like a prince in a cartoon fairy tale. They were clearly having a ceremony of sorts, and she wondered if it was their wedding. Before she could question too much, the vision changed, showing her with Slanya. Sierra looked dejected, and she assumed they must have been discussing something sad, but with a quick glance at her future self's skin, Sierra could see it was still clear. No lesions in sight, so that couldn't be the reason. The next image was of her and Aidan having sex in the treehouse. Sierra felt herself blush, but knew that Fia wasn't judging her. Sierra tried to look more closely to see if she had aged some in this vision in comparison to the previous ones, but it was hard to tell in the dim light. The fourth image was of her in a large library, Aidan sitting at a table behind her. They were both reading large books and scrolls and making notes on parchment. Sierra figured this was her trying to complete her research. The fifth image came, and things in the future began to grow darker. Sierra and Aidan were engaged in a battle, both of them wounded, before the picture flashed again, and she was in another cell, eerily similar to the one she had spent time in just the week before. Sierra's heart rate began to pick up, and her breathing grew labored, even as she reminded herself that Aiden was right there with her. She felt his warmth as he scooted closer, but he didn't touch her, and Sierra figured it was probably for good reason. The sixth image came, and Sierra was running through the enchanted forest alone, but it was impossible to see who was chasing her. It was dark, and she could see well enough to recognize the signs of fear on her own face as she ran. The seventh image came, and Sierra felt all the air leave her body, beginning to feel lightheaded. She was lying on the forest floor, and she didn't need anyone else to tell her that this was the last image because she could see it. She could see she was nearing the end. Her lips were moving, maybe as a silent prayer to the God she had reconnected with in her last moments, or maybe to Mother Nature. She couldn't be sure. She tried to see if there were signs of aging in her face, but to her horror, she didn't look much older than she did now. Sierra let out a whimper, and Fia dropped her hands from the side of her face, the room slowly coming back into focus. Sierra was aware of the tears falling down her cheeks, but she was powerless to stop them. "I can only show you what I see. I don't know when this will happen." Fia apologized. Sierra grimaced. She couldn't decide what hurt more, the fact that her future was only 7 images long and likely close to the end, or the fact that it didn't include finishing her studies or seeing her family in the human world again before her death. "How many images does Aiden have?" Sierra asked in a whisper, the tears continuing to flow. "Hundreds," Fia answered solemnly.